let's look at why everything online is bullshit, especially Yahoo News. It's like, it's freaking the worst. Yahoo News is the worst because it's not actually news in any way. There's nothing. Sometimes they'll have links to news, and in fact, it's this wonderful, corporate webpage that has a long list, a stream of articles, and especially special interest stuff. But there's lots of nice pictures and videos and links to offsites that presumably give you news about the day's events, current events, and a lot of sob stories and things that are supposed to be funny, and none of it really hits the mark because we live in the 21st century now, and so everybody is kind of aware that this is all complete idiocy and humiliating for Americans and humans in general. It's a global humiliation. All right, look at this. Chuck Todd warns Trump on what's next. You're going to miss talking about Mueller. Really. So Chuck Todd is telling the president that he's going to be afraid about the horrible things which are in store for him. He's suggesting that talking to Mueller is better than whatever bullshit that this loser political hack operative has to offer, but I don't really see how that could possibly be the case, considering that Mueller is head of the FBI, or I think the FBI, and is a complete psychopath who would have stopped him nothing he would gladly assassinate. Like, if Robert Mueller had existed, if he had been, like the director of the FBI during the sort of the 60s, 70s era, he would have happily assassinated Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. He just didn't happen to be born in that era. So that's the kind of person we're dealing with. Now, it may be that Trump would have preferred dealing with Mueller over Mr. Todd here, the inimitable, if we are to assume that Trump is a psychopath, which is altogether possible. It depends on what pop culture psychologist you ask. He may well have more in common with Robert Mueller, and so maybe he would be more comfortable even accepting the fact that Mueller is almost certainly a psychopath and closet murderer. It's just when murderers have money and when they're successful, when their lives are well organized, they, rather than being like in gangs on the street or slinging crack to high schoolers, they find a channel with an acceptable channel, and then they can get promoted to high spaces within government, and then rather than just killing their opponent on a street corner of wherever, they then have the authority and the power to be able to kill a whole bunch of people. So that's exciting. Oh god, Nike is taking an extra 20% off of their on-sale sneakers today. Now that's a business article. This doesn't say sponsored by it, because that's exactly, what a journalist would be writing about some 20% off sale. That is some good journalism. That's not an ad, that's called publicity. What happens is that these corporations have marketing firms who they refer to for business, and the marketing firms get their ins with the different media outlets, and the marketing firm writes the story, and they send it to probably the marketing department or somebody within the corporation or the media conglomerate, and they find a place to put that in and to place it within the news stream. When they do it that way, then they don't have to put sponsored by it. I guess it's somehow not an advertisement, but it's an advertisement. It's an advertisement that's a lie. It's a lying advertisement. It's an advertisement where they are trying to lie to their customers, where they're being untruthful to where they're forthrightly and outrightly being lying fucking pieces of shit. And that's normal. Or this state of fucking journalistic corruption is normal. That's what we do now. So there's that. Entertainment news from Cosmo. This is exciting. Oh my god, there's a Game of Thrones fan theory predicting a tragic battle between Jon and Dany, and it actually tracks. According to the entertainment editor at Cosmo, some random theory by the show could make sense. See, these kind of theories you want to get straight from the source, because they're always found like on a subreddit or maybe some other forum where people are just enjoying life and talking amongst their peers about their sort of cumulative interests. And then what happens is one of these venues, they trawl those sections of the internet and they find other people's insight to essentially present as their own, because they have no real value, certainly not as journalists, and they're not very good at editorializing either. When you go straight to the source, even the content is usually more entertainingly written. So, because whenever you process it for mass consumption, it always has the blood sucked right out of it, and it's no longer any good anymore anyway. It's fucking garbage. So you don't need to read that, because you should just watch the show anyway. Unless you want to be, if you want to be part of the speculation process where the fans get together, well, that's the part of the joy is in the discovery of trying to come up with those ideas on your own. So reading this half-assed, bone-dry condensation of the original conversation which originated these theories, there's just no reason to get it this way. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare of soulless deadlessness. Okay, Game of Thrones actor reveals the perfectly acceptable reason for his creepy brands. He doesn't reveal it. It's right there in the text of the show. The Game of Thrones actor reveals. Look, if you're into Game of Thrones, you don't even need to. They don't need to say Game of Thrones actor. They can either say the character's name or the actor's name. This is like they're trying to imitate an actual newspaper headline. If you're not into Game of Thrones, you're not going to read it anyway. And if you are, then you shouldn't write something that shitty. Because implied in perfectly acceptable reason is that there didn't appear to be a perfectly acceptable reason to viewers on first blush, or those who watched the show. But I watched the show, and it was clearly a very, very acceptable reason. It does not need to be justified or editorialized or explained or contextualized by this article. Anybody who's not a complete fucking retard got it when they watched the show in the first place. Do this before your mortgage payment. Ooh, oh, it's genius. It's funny, because I've seen so many genius advices from sponsored content events hidden to look like news. But is this the one? This is the real one. This is it. The one that I have to click on. Kim Kardashian is a future criminal justice lawyer, says she aced her most recent law exam. Huh. That's actually kind of interesting. Because at first I thought that this was a clickbait title. It sounded stupid. But if she actually took a law exam, and she does want to be a future criminal justice lawyer, and we already know that she worked tirelessly to get one woman released from prison with the help of Donald Trump. So that, now speaking of the word track, which I also hate, that actually tracks with reality. That sounds like something that might be, because you don't know if it's real when you just read a headline. That's one of the problems with Yahoo. You read the headlines, you don't know if it's real. It's almost certainly not. Most of it is complete garbage, and so you actually have to question. See, it used to be that people thought either you should question the news or you shouldn't question the news, and it might speak to your patriotism, your loyalty, or your intellect, or something about your character. But now, in this era, to not be a complete idiot, you actually have to question every single headline and whether it's even worth clicking on in the first place, let alone whether you should trust the content, which most of the times you should not. And I can prove that to you, and I'm going to prove that to you. And that's what the show is all about. Mueller reveals Trump's attempts to choke off Russia probe. All right, that, from what I've gleaned, that's actually a legitimate headline. It's from the Associated Press, so that actually kind of makes sense. The AP has been around since at least the 1940s, I think longer. So they are actually pretty legit, because they don't have any purpose for editorializing. They're sort of a giant. They're they're the earliest content mill who actually procures and curates news to be distributed more or less globally. Monty Python star Terry Gilliam clarifies his "I'm tired of being," as a white male, blamed for everything comments. He clarifies. Everybody knows exactly what he means. There's no reason to clarify that. It can't be clarified. No clarification is necessary or required or desirable. What they mean to say is Monty Python, or Terry Gilliam, the great director, bowed to social stress and social pressures to sound like a wet noodle. I mean, he's a little, I'm not sure if he has a spine. I don't think he does. But I've always thought of Terry Gilliam as being kind of, there's something about him that's spineless. I mean, he's a hippie, but not in a good way. Like, I like hippies, and a lot of my friends are hippies, but he's not he's the kind of hippie that I feel like if he would be really passive aggressive if you wore shoes in his house. Like the hippies who have very, very strict rules of conduct. So not like, they like tofu, but they make you want to shoot yourself in the fucking head when you're around them. So that kind of hippie. HBO teases us with new images from episode 2 of the final season of Game of Thrones. No, they didn't. We're not teased. Nobody's teased. Every headline you read is sensationalized and editorialized and glamorized, and it's fucking horrible. All right. How Pete Buttigieg, how Pete Buttigieg. See, I've actually learned how to pronounce it, but you're going to forget how to pronounce it if you actually see how it's spelled, because that doesn't make any sense. But Pete, how did he handle anti-gay protesters shouting about Sodom and Gomorrah at Iowa rally? Well, I mean, obviously this is a pro-Pete article written. Because here's the thing, who cares? Live your own life. It's hardly news that there are a few holdouts who are still obsessed with homosexuality. It's kind of pathetic. They're there. You have to be aware of it. Somebody can learn by the time you're in high school. Yeah, there's still some fringe characters. Fuck them. I've been killing his kind. Man arrested for racist rant caught on video towards Arab AT&T employee. The Texan man spoke of killing the phone store employee's kind and called another customer an expletive. Because a lot of the race relations issues, which are being fervently promoted by the media, have been questionable provenance. Because most of these incidents are not actually significant in any real way. Comparatively to the rest of human history, starting from the dawn of time till about 2015, these have been very pedestrian incidents at best, if we're blowing them out of proportion. Most of human history, of course, has been littered with the corpses of the dead from war and disease and famine and fighting and horrors beyond our cushiony comprehension. But now, one cracker in Tennessee yells at somebody with a different skin color, and it becomes a national scandal. It's incomprehensibly stupid. We should spend any time thinking about this. It should be dealt with at a local level. And it was dealt with at a local level, but it's blown way out of proportion. Now, the common sense among, layman conspiracy theorists is that this is just a natural result of the media gone awry, trying to promote inflammatory news because that's what sells. I'm going to show you over the course this vidcast that it goes deeper. It goes way deeper than that. And it may be that that's the primary thing, but these types of stories are being planted, seeded, and promoted, grown, and watered by other special interests with more pernicious motives. That's the terrifying world we find ourselves living in. I'll get back to that. Oh, look. I've been killing his kind. Really? Have you? Who says that? That's not even a real thing. I've never heard... In all the stories of weird, crazy, racist hicks, like attacking people of diversity, never heard any of them say something like that. It's kind of creative for a racist hick. Like a little too creative, like more... Who does that? Well, there's subtext. There's things that the news headline doesn't explain and that nobody's going to think about when they read it and talk about it around the water cooler or in their smoky den. People don't go off on people for their skin color. There's an element of racism that's very real, obviously. It's caused a lot of horrors throughout history, but the reality is on a day-to-day level, at a local level, on an intimate level, the way that people deal with each other is very much driven by very base human instincts and emotions. If assuming that the story is true at all based on the headline because of a personal issue. He probably had low blood sugar, and he probably was pissed off at the guy for some real reason that had nothing to do with his skin color. But what happens when he decides that he's going to get his revenge or take out his fury is he brings in whatever is the most obvious sore point for his target. But that's not really what it was about. And so the headline is inflammatory for that reason, because the guy, sure, he picked on the guy's race, if you want to call it that, in the heat of the moment, but it wasn't about that. It was about him hating that guy and drawing in what made him different as a point of attack. That's a misinterpretation and an intentional misinterpretation, because it's hard for us in our natural state to be really that confused about what's going on. We know the truth. We know it's not about race. That was Robert reading the news.